Hello and welcome back, part 2. So we're going to continue right where we left off. I'm going to get this power steering pulley off. The bolts are out of it. It's just kind of stuck on with a little bit of rust and corrosion down here. So I'm going to work on getting this pry bar back here and prying this thing off. And then after that's off, we're going to take this upper timing cover off. Alright, the power steering pulley is off. Now, I had to end up using a small harmonic balancer puller to get this thing off. It was really on there, so just put some tension on it with this puller, and then pried from back here. I just did not want to risk cracking this aluminum upper timing chain cover. So now it's time to take this cover off. So there's 5 bolts. There's one over here. It's hard to see. Right there. One down here. One right in the center. One in this lower corner over here. And one up here. And then you just kind of pry this thing off. Okay, the upper timing cover is off. The next thing to do is we need to lock this thing in top dead center on the compression stroke, so it can be at top dead center and have these cams be 180 out. How you know is in the back here, there is a stamp. Let me zoom in here real quick so you can see the back of this. It's very difficult to see, but you can see at the top right now there is a some lettering. At the bottom some numbers. Don't worry about that. That lettering at the top there, essentially right here at the top, right there at the top, needs to be facing down. So we are going to turn this engine over one time to get that facing down. Okay, here we go. We're going to turn the engine. It's a 24mm socket to get on the crank bolt. You notice here I've put a moving blanket, a towel in front of the radiator in case you drop or slip anything, you don't hit the radiator. This is always a good practice to do. So, exactly 360 degrees here. Right there. Okay. Now we need to go underneath the engine. We're going to have to remove the starter, and we're going to have to remove the crank position sensor, and 2 tools go in there to lock this thing in top dead center so the engine can't move in this position. So before I crawl underneath the car and do this, I'll show you the tool kit. I have done a Range Rover before with the 5.0 version of this engine, and I had the tools for that, but they're slightly different for the 3.0. So what you see on the left and the right here, these will be used later to lock the camshafts in place. This tool here is for locking and timing the fuel pump camshaft. This is for pre-tensioning the variators that I'll get to. This tool here is used to pull the, I showed you earlier, pull the fuel injectors. And this tool here, you take the starter out and you bolt this in, and you can see that there's some screws here. You put in either one of these adapters over here. This particular one is the one we'll use for the 3.0 V6. This will lock the flywheel into place. This will grab onto one of the teeth of that. And this one is used for the 5.0. This goes in between a couple teeth. So there's a couple of those, and then right here is for the cam position sensor. This one here on the right is for the 5.0 engine, and this one right here is for the 3.0 engine. There's a different looking square rectangle underneath there that this will go into, and I'm going to show you that. So I'm going to show you how to install this guy with this adapter on it, and this one here as well. I'll get underneath the car and do that now. So here we are on the driver's side of the engine for a left-hand drive vehicle. This is your crank position sensor. It's a T30 bolt. You pull that out, Since I know it's in top dead center, you can see in there that a little rectangle. So this guy right here just fits in there and bolts in place. So we're going to put this in here like so, and then we're going to bolt it in. I'm going to need 2 hands to do this, so I'm just going to do that and get back with you. Alright, there it is. She's in. Be prepared to have to rock the engine back and forth. What I mean by that is just move it slightly to the left or to the right using your 24mm socket on the crank sprocket to line that up. It can be a little bit fussy. Okay, here's the starter. We're going to unbolt this guy, let it hang off to the side, and we're going to put in the flywheel lock in the starter hole. There is the starter. Well, there is no longer a starter in there. I've pulled the starter out. You don't have to pull it out all the way. I chose to because I want to get to this exhaust bolt up here when I'm pulling the cylinder head. Just clear some space for me. But anyway, this is the locking tool. To get the starter out, it's mainly just 2 bolts. There's one longer one right here and one shorter one up here. And this one's a real pain because the catalytic converter's in the way. And also you'll see a heat shield here. So basically I had to use a 13mm spanner wrench, just a regular wrench, to get up in there, and 1/8 of a turn at a time undo that. So a little difficult. But anyway, this is the locking tool in here, and I'm going to cut to an inspection mirror and show you what it looks like on the ring gear. So this is what it looks like on the inside. You can see that that adapter piece fits right over the ring gears to hold that sucker in place. So now that we have this locked into place at top dead center, we're going to go ahead and pull the crankshaft pulley off. That's next. Crank bolt is out. Once again, 24mm. Here it is. If you see a 12, see it says 12.9. It's reverse thread. That means righty loosey, lefty tighty. You can see here the threads. It is reverse thread. So take note of that before you pull this off. Check this number. You see a 10 point something. It's going to be left hand normal to loosen, lefty loosey. If you see a 12, it's righty loosey, lefty tighty. Now there's some Torx bolts, T50s. I'm going to pull those off. And the crankshaft pulley is off. You know, Land Rover sells some tools to do this. They're super expensive. Not only a holding tool, but a pulling tool. I can't remember what it is. It's like $500 for both of those tools. That's not going to happen. Come on now. This is a regular harmonic balancer puller. There's some bolts in there. You know, it just takes a little bit of ingenuity to get this thing pulled off. I did it by putting the bolt back in halfway, putting a 24mm socket over it, and then press it against the socket. That way I didn't risk damaging any crankshaft there. So that got it off most of the way, and then I pulled the puller back off and then took the bolt and the socket off, and then just lightly pulled it the rest of the way. Anyway, that is off. Now it's time to get the lower timing cover off. This guy here, there's a bunch of 8mm bolts that go all the way around. I'm going to pull those, and then I'm going to pull this lower timing cover off, and we should be able to see the rest of the damage from this side over here. All the bolts are out of the lower timing cover. You have to either take out the water pump or the vacuum pump to get this lower timing cover off. I chose the vacuum pump for 3 reasons. One, I have to remove it anyway because you have to stick a tool in here to check the timing of that. There's a intermediate shaft down here that runs the high pressure fuel pumps on the side of the engine, and if that is off, your engine's not going to run right. They need to be timed. In addition to that, it was leaking oil. The seal that goes around here was completely flat, so I was going to replace that anyway. And 3, the water pump is not leaking. It's fairly easy to replace, so I'm going to leave well enough alone. This has only got 60,000 miles on this car. And if you go to remove this and putting stuff back together, it can be kind of old and brittle. Like this piece back here. Didn't want to risk breaking that. It's not broke. Not going to touch it. So we're going to leave that for now. Let's get this lower timing cover off and inspect the rest of the damage. Lower timing cover is off. The chain is not on the crank. It's wedged behind it between the two chains. This front one here goes up to the passenger side cylinder head for these sprockets. And the chain behind it is the one that's still good. All these components look good going up to these sprockets. You can see that the chain is actually behind the tensioner guide. I'm touching the tensioner guide right here. I'm kind of at a loss what caused this. But anyway, I know how it goes back together correctly. So that's just what I'm going to do. I'm going to continue to take this stuff apart and, you know, get it all put back together correctly. Now here's something that's crazy. I've had over 50 cars since I was 16, and probably 20 of those I've done timing chain jobs on. I have never seen this happen. While I was messing with this chain and looking around here, I noticed that this sprocket here was able to turn there like that, and the camshaft wasn't turning. Then I took a look and I noticed that it has snapped. The camshaft is snapped right there. Let me push this out of the way. Look at that. Holy shit. You know, back when I was talking about, you know, one of these valves being more bent than the other, well, this is why this camshaft just snapped. And I've never seen that before. So, right now, if you could say a little prayer with me that when the pistons impacted the valves, this was the weak point and it snapped here, and I don't have any holes in the pistons. So I'm going to take all these chains off, get all this timing stuff off. Then we're going to work on removing these camshafts, what's left of them, unbolting the exhaust manifold from the downpipe catalytic converter, and taking this cylinder head off. That's what's next. All of the timing chain components are off. Here's the passenger side, here's the driver's side stuff. Let's go over the good side first. This is the driver's side. The static arm is good, some wear in it, but all the bolts are intact. The tensioner arm is good, still got its black plastic on it, some wear on it, but normal wear and tear. The tensioner looks good, it's still spring loaded. Piston comes right back out. The bad side. The static guide is actually still good, and none of the bolts broke. The tensioner arm is really bad. The black plastic is gone, and the chainsawed some pieces of it, so I will have to get down in there with a fiber optic camera into the oil sump and fish those out. Here's the root cause. This is the tensioner on this side. First off, let's compare. Look at how far out this piston is on the good side and how far out it is here. It's pretty retracted. There is no spring to this whatsoever. The spring has collapsed inside this piston, which caused the chain to get really loose inside of here. Probably slapped around, broke this plastic off here, slipped off the teeth on the sprockets, and then being out of time, the pistons hit the valves, and the shock of the pistons hitting the valves looks like it snapped this camshaft. I still can't believe this intake camshaft. I've never come across this before, having that issue. So let's continue digging. We're not all the way there yet. We got to get the cylinder head off. So I think I've already gone over this, but I'll go over it again. Oil filter housing is going to have to come off. The camshafts, what's left of them, come out. The crossover pipe in the back here for coolant needs unbolted. and the exhaust manifold to the downcomer catalytic converter needs unbolted. Then we unbolt the cylinder head and pull it off. That's next. Here's the oil filter housing. Take the top off, take the filter out, throw the filter away. Then you've got 3 T30 screws down there to undo and pull this out. Highly recommend. You're going to pretty much have to stick some paper towels down in there and soak up the residual oil. Take those 3 screws out. Okay, those 3 screws are out. You got 1 more in the back right there. That off, and this thing should come off. Okay, the oil filter housing is off. There's a gasket that'll come off with it. I also pulled the coolant crossover pipe. It's in the back here. There's 3 T30 screws. You can see 2 of them here on the sides. There's also 1 on bottom, and that's on each side, so a total of 6 screws. Just unscrew that and pull that off the back of the cylinder heads. Next, while I'm up here, I'm going to go ahead and pull these camshafts off. If you ever run into where the lobes of the camshaft are putting some pressure on the valves, you'll want to turn the camshaft one way or the other just to try to reduce the amount of pressure that it's pushing down when you pull these camshafts off. You don't want to crack those. So anyway, I'm going to pull these off. Looks like they're T30 Torx. Okay, the cams are out. We're almost there. Just a few more things. Got some bolts here in the front. You don't want to forget, underneath that oil filter housing, there's a bolt here. Can't forget about that. That's why we took this oil filter housing off. There's a bolt that's holding the fuel rails onto the side here. And then we got to get the exhaust manifold unbolted from the catalytic converter downcomer pipe there. Then after that, it's we're just going to unbolt the cylinder head from the block and lift it off. I'll go that step by step. I think next I'm going to crawl underneath the car and get this exhaust off. Alright, I did not show it, but I unbolted the exhaust. It's 2 15mm nuts in the back. You get underneath the car and get to those. Kind of difficult to get to. Very difficult if I were to try to film it. Then I removed the T30 bolt off of the fuel rails here. The 2 T30 bolts on the outside of the head here. On this other head, they're on the inside, but over here they're on the outside because this head sits back a little bit further. And then this 10mm bolt here, that was where the oil filter housing was. And I did just go ahead and remove the knock sensor. You can just unplug it if you want. I just decided to unbolt it and let it just sit down here. Now it's time to detension the head. The head bolts are a T60. You can get the special tool if you want. What I ended up doing is just improvising a little bit here. My Craftsman set has a T60, but this is too big to fit through the access hole there. So Craftsman lets you back off this set screw and take out the actual bit. So took the actual bit out, put a paper towel around it. That's a mechanic's trick, so you don't slip these out of there. Take up any tolerance, and tapped it in here into a 12mm socket. And I will detension the head. I'm going to start with the outside bolts and then work my way in. Okay, I've detensioned, working my way from the out into in, and I figured I wouldn't show you all of these, but I'll show you here the last one I'm going to do. These things are really tight, really tight. Make sure that you, when you get the bit on there, that you take a little hammer and knock it down. Make sure that the thing's fully seated. So I'm going to put this breaker bar on, and I'm going to put a cheater bar on over the breaker bar. You're probably going to hear 2 pops. All right. There's one. There's 2. All right. There's that. Still not all the way to detention yet, so pull this sucker off. Move it over here. There we go. That's loose. Now I'll use like a 3/8 impact, and I'm just going to run all these out, use the magnetic tool and pull them out, and I'll show you. Okay, here's the head bolts. Right here. All 8 of them are out. You can see got everything organized down here. Not going to use any of this stuff, but just keeping it together. Passenger side, driver side. And then this is the exhaust camshaft. This is the broken intake camshaft. And I've kept all of the cam caps. You got to keep these cam caps in order. So they're all in order from front to back of the engine. Same thing with the cam followers. I went ahead and removed those, otherwise known as lifter buckets. Underneath them, you can see that they're different sizes. This one here is a 3.220. This one here is a 3.205. They're a little bit different sizes for valve lash. Most vehicles nowadays use hydraulic lifters that automatically adjust, and I think that's how everything should be, quite honestly. But we got to keep these in order. Cylinder head shop might have to rearrange them though, depending with the new valves. We'll take a look at that later. More on that later. I'm going to go ahead and pull the cylinder head off and set it down right here. You guys don't want to watch me do that, do you? Struggle by myself? Okay, fine, I'll film it. I don't always wear gloves. When I do, lifting cylinder heads, especially with the manifold still intact. Anyway, plan is to go up, rest, down. I forgot to mention, you will need to unclip your oxygen sensor. This is attached to the manifold, and there is the fuel line that runs right here, is also bolted to the back of the cylinder head. After those two minor things, you lift it right off here. Okay, there's the cylinder head down there on the ground. We'll look at that in a second. First off, I wanted to look at the pistons. I was really concerned about some holes in the pistons. I cleaned some of the coolant out, so the pistons are still a little wet on top, but I'm not seeing any holes in the pistons. You can see some impact marks. Here's a good one right here, and then you can see the outline of a valve striking it right there in that circle. So definitely gonna have a bent valve there. Looks like we got another impact mark there up top, and another one up top here. So we're gonna have some bent intake valves, looks like, for sure. Let's look at the bottom of the cylinder head. Here is the bottom of the cylinder head. This is the front where this is where the timing chain comes through. So I gotta tell you, to the naked eye, I really can't see any problem. These valves look pretty dang good. I just can't see any. Normally you'll see a gap, and I'm not seeing it. I refuse to believe though that the valves are stronger than the camshaft, and the cam was the weak point and snapped, but I don't know, I guess maybe. No matter what though, I mean, this cylinder head is going to go to the shop. It's off. It's an incredible amount of work to get it off. So why not check this thing out? It's going to have to be checked out. We see impact marks. This has got to have a leak down test. It's got to be checked. So that's going to happen. So I'm going to take off this manifold here. I don't think you need to see that. And then strip the head down the rest of the way and get this off to the cylinder head shop. All right, let's talk. You have seen that the intake camshaft on this right-hand cylinder head is trashed. It's been sheared off. So I'm trying to figure out what to do. Option A, I still send my current cylinder head to the shop, have it checked out, anything that's broken, replaced, and source myself a intake camshaft from a salvage yard. Option B is to just source an entire right-hand cylinder head for this car. That'll come with the intake and exhaust camshafts, no bent valves. Just slap it on. We're talking about maybe $100 to $200 difference, probably. $100 to $200 more for the whole camshaft. The whole
cylinder head on the right hand side. So I'm leaning towards doing that, just getting myself a entire cylinder head from a salvage yard and just putting it on. Let me know what you think. Put it in the comments if you want. If not, wait till part 3 and you will figure out what I am going to do. This ends part 2. Thanks for watching.